Welcome, welcome. I am Dr. Patrice Berry. I am a licensed psychologist, and here sometimes I cover these court trials from a psychological perspective. And I really like to take a look at NGRI, not guilty by reason of insanity, or there was some conversation on this one, I think, about mental defect. They really take a look at all these things. Once Sarah is here, let me know when you're here so we can discuss your comment about psychology and the law and how, yeah, just how that dynamic can play out. So we're going to cover the evening, the people that testified this afternoon. I covered Dr. and I wrote down her name, Diane Lighton, I think is how you say it, Lighton, something like that. Her testimony from this morning was difficult to watch because she wasn't concise. So, with a not guilty by reason of insanity, some a psychologist that's going to be supporting that diagnosis, they are going to talk about their mental state at the time of the crime. And it would have been really important, I think, for her to do some type of testing, or at least, especially if she was going to have a contrary opinion to people that did actually do testing. And so, hey, Ray, hello, A. Heineman, hello, Tiffany. Welcome to everybody that's joining. If y'all have comments as we go or questions, please let me know. As you all know, the jury has already come back with a verdict on this one. I will play that here at the end. Their verdict did not surprise me at all. And I'm also going to cover the known risk of using methamphetamine and then also talking about living well with serious mental illness. Because as y'all know, I like to talk about breaking stigma, and there are people that have mental health diagnoses and don't end up, committing crimes and all that stuff. And so I just lightened the hair. So I lightened it. I think it was Sunday. I think I did it on Sunday. Thank you so much. I'm going to go back to red. So this is technically it made it like a light brown kind of blondish thing going on. I did an accidental ombre. It's not, so I color my own hair because I don't, I do it myself. And but yeah, so let me go on ahead and start with the testimony of Dr. Matthew Seipel. I think I'm bad with names. So Dr. Matthew, let's go on ahead and start with him. He is a forensic psychologist and he did a competency evaluation. So that was competency to stand trial. So that would have been her mental state during the trial. Is she able to aid in her defense? Is she able to understand who the judge is, what's expected in court? Those are the types of things that competency takes a look at for competency to stand trial.
Can you mentioned that you were retained by the court to do a competency evaluation, and earlier you also mentioned that you do NGI evaluations. Can you explain for the jury the difference between those two types of evaluations?
Yeah, so those are two entirely different types of evaluations that are guided by two different state statutes. And so competency pertains to a defendant's current mental status. It is independent of the mental state at the time of the alleged offenses, and it pertains to whether or not the defendant presently has substantial mental capacity to understand the pending proceedings or to meaningfully assist in their defense. Whereas the state statute for NGI dictates it is about the defendant's mental state at the time of the alleged offenses, and specifically, was there a qualifying mental disease or defect that contributed to a substantial lack of capacity to appreciate wrongfulness of conduct or to conform conduct to the standards of the law.
And you indicate that you have substantial present experience in both of those types of evaluations. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now,
okay, so this was the competency evaluation was requested by the court, and he did that evaluation. The defense is going to kind of question his credentials, and we'll get to that on cross-examination. But to me, he did a very good job presenting the facts, staying on track, keeping things really tight and clean. And Phoenix, thank you so much for joining. Y'all know I love Emily D. Baker, and that chat goes by so fast. Okay.
They are different evaluations with different standards. However, are the materials used to evaluate those often similar?
I would say that collateral records are critical in both evaluations, although in competency, those records would focus most heavily on the present time and present functioning, whereas for NGI, it would be focused upon functioning at the time of the alleged offenses.
And can you talk about the records that you reviewed regarding Ms. Shabusiness for each of the two competency evaluations that you performed?
Yes, and so I reviewed the criminal complaint for the underlying matter. I reviewed all previous psychological evaluations that were completed in reference to this case, including competency and NGI reports from multiple examiners. At both times, I reviewed her contemporary treatment records from the Brown County Jail. And during the most recent evaluation, I also had the opportunity to review a discharge summary from a treatment episode at the Nicolay Psychiatric Center in 2021.
Did you, subsequent to the evaluation, were you also provided with copies of materials from an inpatient stay at Bellin Psychiatric, or two different inpatient stays at Bellin Psychiatric?
Yes, after submitting my most recent report, defense counsel provided me discharge summaries pertaining to those two episodes of inpatient care.
And were all of those records taken into consideration when you either rendered your opinion or provided testimony at competency hearings in this case?
I would say that all of the sources that I mentioned initially were considered in reaching my opinion in my report. And then those Bellin records I did consider in preparing for testimony, but they did not alter any of the opinions offered in my report.
And in addition to reviewing collateral records, did you conduct personal interviews with Ms. Shabusiness?
Yes, I did.
And what were the dates of those interviews?
And so the most recent interview, I'm just referencing my report here, was on July 12th of 2023. And for the initial interview, I would reference to refresh my memory, that report from November of 2022, the date of the interview was November 17th.
Okay. And so he is also a forensic psychologist. And to me, his testimony, he is keeping it short and sweet, answering the questions and providing the facts, including his opinion. But he's doing it in a much different way than what we saw earlier with the other doctor.
2022.
And were both of those in-person interviews?
Yes.
And can you estimate approximately how long you met with Ms. Shabusiness in those interviews?
On both occasions, it was roughly 90 minutes, perhaps give or take a few minutes.
Doctor, when you were reviewing the records and ultimately when you had to come to an opinion in this case, had you encountered prior diagnoses that had been assigned to Ms. Shabusiness at various points in time?
Yes.
Were you aware that at some point in time she had received a bipolar diagnosis?
Yes.
And do you recall where that came from?
That was during her inpatient treatment at the Nicolay Psychiatric Center in 2021.
And Doctor, what did you note with respect to that particular diagnosis? Were there any concerns when you saw that?
Yes, a concern I had with that diagnosis is that for one to be diagnosed with bipolar disorder, it's specifically within the diagnostic criteria for that condition. And I noted that there's multiple collateral sources suggesting that she was abusing methamphetamine very extensively leading up to that treatment episode. So I was unable to really see how the treatment providers could have parsed out to what extent any psychiatric instability derived from the methamphetamine use versus an actual underlying mental illness.
So that statement made me go back and leave a comment on my earlier video because I was not aware that. So I think I knew that she had tested positive for methamphetamines at the time, but any manic type episode that she was experiencing, that from this expert's testimony, the manic episodes always went along with methamphetamine use. So during methamphetamine intoxication. So that's where I want to switch and talk about, and I linked the full video in the description. I also have this link in there as well. This is for educational this is for educational purposes only, and this is to talk about the risk of this type of use. And so the short term health effects can be increased blood pressure and body temperature, faster breathing, irregular heartbeat, loss of appetite, disturbed sleep or nausea, erratic, aggressive, irritable, or violent behavior. And so those are some of the short term risks. And then chronic use can lead to damaging long term health effects that can include the following, even when people stop. So, even when they stop this medication, here are some of the things that can occur: permanent damage to the heart and brain, high blood pressure leading to heart attacks, strokes, and liver, kidney, and lung damage, anxiety, confusion, and insomnia, paranoia, hallucinations, mood disturbances, delusions, and aggressive behavior, including psychotic symptoms, can sometimes last for months or years after use. Intense itching, causing skin sores from scratching, premature osteoporosis, and then severe dental problems. And so that, because some people were asking for some of that information. And based on this testimony, it was really difficult to see what was due to that use and what was the other thing. And now she did have a hospitalization after an attempt, I think back when she was 14. I think another expert is going to talk about this. And the individual that did her insanity evaluation, they did not have those court records, but still she was able to maintain employment. That somebody that typically meets criteria for NGI, because this came up with Letitia Stout too. They talked about the fact that she maintained employment and nobody saw any major psychological symptoms outside of typical anxiety with that particular case. And so um so when you use medication as prescribed, then you would not have those types of effects. That's why when they start someone on medication, they typically start them at the lowest possible dose. So it is when people abuse those substances, that's when they can have. So somebody with ADHD that takes Adderall, they're not gonna feel. It's not gonna give a feeling of being high. That somebody, because what the medication is doing is it's helping their brain function the way somebody that's more neurotypical. So that is what the medication is typically going to do. There are non-stimulant medications, and sometimes I have recommended for individuals that had history of substance abuse. Sometimes I've recommended, because of the potential of of abuse, I've sometimes recommended that they take a look at non-stimulant options that have less of that effect. And that's why doctors, so that is, those medications are regulated. And so sometimes I've had clients have difficulty getting their prescriptions filled. There has been a shortage of those types of medications, so the prescribed Adderall, Concerta, Ritalin. There has been a shortage where I've had families struggling to get their typical prescription filled, because there had been some overdiagnosis, especially during COVID. There were a lot of pop-ups of places that didn't seem to do a very thorough ADHD evaluation. And so with all of that funding ending, people now have to get in-person evaluations prior to being prescribed that type of and I do agree that things can be misdiagnosed. And I don't know. So both of these experts today are going to say that she does not have any mental health diagnosis outside of the substance use or abuse. Um, I think she struggled with the loss of her mother, understandably. There was some question of, did she have ADHD in childhood? to me, that would explain throwing the chair at that last evaluator. That could potentially explain it. Yes, I think is that. I don't think that one is I have to look that one up because what the brand name for that one. I know some people do Strattera, some people do Wellbutrin, which is more it's anxiety. It does, but they find that it sometimes helps with concentration. Different people take a lot of different things. Christina B, thanks for sharing. I have a prescription, but after hearing how I'll acclimate, then need more and more, I take doses only when you think you need it. No problem. Because sometimes the body will build up a tolerance to the medication, and then sometimes people have to switch. So I know some people that started out on one medication, and then because each medication has a different formula, it's similar. It interacts with the brain differently, but each formula is different. And so sometimes people will switch different ones. I am not a medication expert, okay? But I know a lot about these things so I can help my clients communicate what they need to their doctors. And so I think I am correct. Bipolar disorder does not have a cure. Um, so there are people that are able to manage their bipolar symptoms. Often medication can be really helpful. I do a program called Supernatural. It's a VR headset exercise workout, and there's somebody in that community that uses exercise to manage their symptoms. And they do still get depressive episodes, and they do still get some manic episodes, but every person kind of manages things differently. I believe that health and wellness, that there should be a holistic approach. I don't think medicine will do everything. Like I think taking a holistic approach. And so yes. And so let's keep going. And so I'm not sure. So nobody said that. So I don't know. The one doctor did think that she was exhibiting psychosis, but none of the other experts agreed with that. They all felt that she was feigning symptoms. And so nobody said that though. But let's keep going.
Did you have an opportunity to review the discharge summary from Nicolay Psychiatric?
Yes.
And in that discharge summary, is there a discussion of how she presented upon arrival compared to how she presented upon her release 21 days later?
Yes, it was noted that there was a remarkable difference and that psychotic symptoms were evident upon admission, including hallucinations and very disorganized behavior, although those symptoms were determined to be largely resolved by the end of that treatment episode.
Does that suggest anything to you with respect to the substance abuse that was indicated at the outset?
And so it's, again, difficult to disentangle to what extent that improved mental status resulted from any medication she received in the facility versus her mere forced abstinence from intoxicants.
Based on your professional education and experience of the types of symptoms that were noted upon arrival at Nicolay Psychiatric, can those symptoms also be associated with the methamphetamine use solely?
Yes.
So it's possible.
So y'all know I watch the chat for any questions. And so it is difficult for me to watch Taylor Shabusiness. Like what she did was just it gives me that kind of evil. I don't know. Like it's just it doesn't sit right with me. I at no point thought that she was um psychotic or that she like this just seems more antisocial to me, more yeah. So I watched a case of a kid down, I think he was like 15 or 7, I think he was a teenager down in Florida that he just wanted to harm a classmate. Like he fantasized about murder. And so but not and there was no mental health diagnosis that was going on there. That was just pure antisocial, against the social norms. And with an NGRI defense, it can't be due to voluntary substance use or abuse, and it can't be due to antisocial behavior, because antisocial disorder, personality disorder, is a mental health diagnosis, but that is one that is exempt within the legal system. They did not offer any diagnoses of like personality disorders or anything like that. I think her testing, because when they gave her the MMPI, it sounds like it was very invalid, and that likely made diagnosis difficult. But
Possible for someone to manifest those symptoms solely based on meth use without having any underlying mental health illness.
Objection
Yes.
calls for speculation.
he's able to answer that.
Yes.
You indicated that you had the opportunity to review reports from other evaluators who met with Ms. Shabusiness and provided opinions in this case. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about her behavior in the courtroom. And to me, when the jury wasn't present, she seemed to be a little bit more, her facial expressions to me weren't as exaggerated. She does like stare down people and do things like that. And she smirks, and she was laughing. Her eyes kind of did, and kind of an odd thing. And she was pretty consistent with it, I think, throughout all of that. I also saw the video of her attacking her last attorney. I think it was the last one, where it was just out of nowhere. She just like went off to hit him. And I think at that point, I think that attorney questioned her competency and requested some of these evaluations and everything. And so I did hear that. I think there's a picture of her holding, it's a selfie of her holding a Jeffrey Dahmer fit picture. And so I like looking at crime stuff, but it's from a way of just trying to understand human behavior. It's from but it's not in a like to do crimes, or like it's not like, no. And really, the more of this that I see, I'm like, oh my gosh, like there are so many ways to find people. I did see, so I haven't talked about this case here yet, the Rex, that potential serial guy up in, it's like, so y'all know I'm not good at talking about this stuff off the top of my head, but I know his name is Rex, and I believe his wife recently filed for divorce. I want to say it was within the last week or so. And that case, how he got away with all of those things, likely because his targets were working women, people that society weren't. That's really sad for me. That Long Island, there we go. Thank you. Yes. It was he targeted sex workers. That's just who he targeted. And so, Christina, thank you for mentioning that her interrogation was horrible. And I did see the experts talk about those portions. And I think the next expert talks about how she was able to remember like what happened and all those details. And then later she says she doesn't remember it. But if right after the incident, if she's saying exactly what happened, to me, so as a clinical psychologist, if I did do forensic, and y'all know, because somebody asked about the difference between forensic and clinical, that forensic tends to be, so they do additional training about the law and different forensic and court procedures. I have testified in court, typically in family cases, juvenile justice, or what's the other one? I've done other court cases. I have had somebody come to do a court-ordered evaluation, and they were completely mute and didn't say a word. And I canceled the evaluation because I can't do the evaluation if the person isn't going to speak, if they're not going to engage and participate. I let them know that I saw that as not being compliant, And they were going to have one more choice: to participate in the evaluation, or I was going to let their probation officer know that they weren't being compliant, which was going to result in potential consequences for them. So, but the next time they came back, they actively engaged. I was able to get through the whole evaluation, and there wasn't. But that first time that they didn't engage with me, that was more of a behavioral, like, control thing than a, like, the person wasn't actively psychotic or anything like that. And so, um, I agree. So let me put this one. Let me see. Right. Ray, I agree. I think she comes off as impulsive. I do. I think she comes off as incredibly impulsive. And she does come off as odd and a bit eccentric, but that could be just what the substances have done to her brain over time. And then y'all know, so I hope y'all know, I do not like the diagnosis oppositional defiant disorder, but like it is a thing. I don't like I think I did end up diagnosing, but with that, with the person that was exhibiting oppositional defiant behaviors, there was a parenting and family issue. There was a significant parenting and family issue that needed to be addressed. And so I recommended, it's called multi-systemic, it's MST. I recommended a type of therapy that can be really helpful. Um, she filed fast as more evidence and things, but also I think some of the victims' families can start to sue him potentially in civil court, or like he could potentially. I think she was trying to protect herself and her kids. That whole case is just very, very interesting, and so yes, that was the case that I was talking about earlier. Hey, you administered achievement test while students sat under your desk. Yes, he had severe behaviors, so it was a total win that he was participating. And so I've sometimes I've had students that have severe anxiety, or I've also had people that had significant trauma. That happened one time. I worked with a very young child that had been locked in rooms, and so I would not make them stay. So I think because the I was in a big testing office the day I did the eval, there were like three different testing rooms, and this kid would move. So we went through all three rooms. I think it took me 3 sessions to get through all of the testing, because I would not close the door and force the student to, because that could trigger that person's response of when they were forced to be in. Y'all know I love the jokes. I get what you're saying. Isn't oppositional defiance what psychopath? So that was in the DSM-4, I believe. So the DSM-4 laid out the ODD, conduct disorder, and then antisocial personality disorder. And there can be conduct disorder. The reason why I don't like oppositional defiant disorder is because it can be overdiagnosed, particularly in Black boys and then also in marginalized groups. So if two kids present with the same behavior, a European American little boy might get diagnosed with separation anxiety because he's throwing chairs when mom drops him off at kindergarten. But they realize it's the separation that's triggering this behavior. And then same behavior, child throwing chairs when dropped off at kindergarten. Somebody else might see that as ODD. I've also seen people miss autism diagnoses, and so that's why I'm careful with that. But yes, and so the DSM-5 typically conduct to, but a lot of people were diagnosed with oppositional defiant disorder that didn't end up getting, that never had conduct disorder and never ended up with anything else. Also, children that are physically disciplined, so children that are spanked, have higher incidence of aggression and of like oppositional type behavior, and that's where I see that as a parenting issue, where we need, where the child is hitting at school, so the parent hits them at home, which is like kids, like you're hitting to get them. It's a whole thing. And so so that's my whole thing about that. So he's going to go on to talk about some stuff. He pretty much, him talking about the difference between how with bipolar disorder, how there can't be that substance, that at every point that he saw where it was documented that she was displaying psychotic symptoms, he also saw methamphetamine use. And also I'd be interested to know if even when she was younger and because I don't, those records weren't completely clear. So it was very difficult for me to follow the doctor from this morning. Like she said a lot of words, she read a whole bunch of stuff, but I don't think I retained anything she said. And so yes. All right. So like I said, the defense is going to question because he was just licensed in 2022. But in order to become a psychologist, you first of all complete your educational training. So before I was licensed, I had been practicing for 4 years. Wait a minute, 5 years, not even four. I had been practicing for 5 years. I had 4 years of clinical work in my doctoral program and then a 1 year internship. So I had been practicing for 5 years by the time I was licensed. So because they kind of brought up the fact of how can you be questioning this other doctor that has all of this history and has all this information. And so I agree. I don't think she was nearly as bad as Dr. Lewis, but yes, she was still very, very confusing, and it was very difficult for me to follow her. Let me see if I can get to where the defense is asking him all those questions. I think I can.
In
do
the
that.
Wisconsin Forensic Unit.
Would she be a colleague or a coworker of yours?
I would say we
And so the defense tried to almost make it sound like the two doctors they're testifying today, that they are on like the same team or that they know each other or that they're somehow biased in some way.
are similarly
And he never said that, but to me that's what the questions were alluding to.
employed, although we practice typically in different areas of the state and have pretty minimal contact with each other.
And the two of you are aligned as far as opinions in the
Christina, I'm going to send you to bed. I'm just kidding. No, no. So I have had somebody disassemble a chair to not throw at me. It wasn't a chair. It was a different piece of furniture. I don't want to share too much information because it has not happened very frequently. But then they started to throw items and so normally in my situations, rarely has aggression been directed towards me, except for when I worked in inpatient settings. But when I did home-based therapy as an outpatient therapist, I've had verbal aggression towards me, or like clients get so upset that they storm out or something. But typically, if somebody's getting mad in session, they might be getting mad at a parent. Parent might be getting mad at the child, and then I manage that to make sure everybody stays physically and emotionally safe. But yeah.
in this particular case. Is that fair?
Well, we opined on different issues, so I would not agree with that statement.
But the ultimate recommendation is the same, correct?
I guess I'm not sure what you're asking, sir.
That you and her both find insufficient evidence to support the special plea, the NGI plea.
I would say I did not offer an opinion with regard to NGI, so again, I can't agree with that statement.
Okay. You've had a chance to review Brown County jail records, correct?
Yes.
You reviewed Bell and Health records that I sent, correct?
Yes.
You had a chance to review the Nicolay Psychiatric Center records through Brown County, correct?
Yes.
You reviewed a lot of mental health records, correct?
Yes.
Fair to say that Taylor Denise Shabusiness does have a mental health history. Would that be fair?
I would say in general terms, yes, she has had contact with mental health treatment.
And fair to say that she was the subject of a civil commitment in 2021, correct?
Yes, it is my understanding that she became subject to a 6-month civil commitment during the course of her inpatient treatment in 2021.
And she was found by a court of law to be mentally ill, at least in 2021. Is that fair?
According to that court order, it would suggest that, yes.
And then she was on a medication order in order to take psychotropic medications for that same period of time, correct?
And it does seem like this 2021 incident was after she had been using substances, and I think that's what he's getting at. Hey, Sarah. So, Sarah, help me clarify your comment from earlier, okay? Because talking about how law and psychology, how you think they're strange bedfellows, because I think they can coexist, but I think and forensic is very different. So that's where I think forensic is a lot more black and white. I think clinical tends to be a lot more broad, but and that's why I like clinical psychology. I do not do forensic in practice. I like doing it, like talking about forensic stuff here, but I got a question earlier about, although the prosecution's experts are saying she has no mental health diagnosis aside from substance abuse, isn't psychopathology or personality disorder not a defense? And also, shouldn't they have done an assessment? Why didn't they bring this up? And so somebody, yeah, because typically if somebody has something like borderline personality disorder or definitely antisocial personality disorder, they are not going to meet criteria for NGI. I think they because they are pretty much saying, I think, that her behavior was due to the substances. Like, I think that's how they're saying it, and that's why I covered a little earlier, what the, long-term effects of methamphetamines, what that can do, and that is abusing, like, those substances versus, which is a very different thing than the smaller dose that people get when they take their ADHD medication as prescribed. And so I did want to answer that question from earlier. Um Okay, there we go. So Sarah, you talked about seeing meth-induced psychosis, and that would still be due to voluntary subs. And so I think in this state, there is something specific about voluntary substance abuse not meeting criteria. Because I think there was a guy in Florida that there was like a cannibal type situation, but he was found like he was on something, and he did not think what he was doing was wrong. He was not in his right state of mind. For her, when she was arrested, like the fact that, remember, she said, I sh- the bucket. Remember, she kind of said I shouldn't have left the bucket, and she mentioned getting lazy, and so to me, her behavior sounds more criminal. Like, it doesn't sound like she was out of her mind and didn't have any awareness of what she was doing. I think she also wanted to do what she, and this is just my opinion, okay? So my opinion is that I think she just wanted to do I even if she was sober, she might have still done what she did. Like I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. And so, yeah, yes. So somebody said, heard in most states, no personality disorders can be considered for NG. So y'all would know better than me because I don't follow all of this stuff. Only mental health diagnoses. And so, because personality disorders are characterological conditions that cannot, so they are long-standing, and that would be harder to rehabilitate versus somebody that has schizophrenia that in a paranoid episode make does something. And so the fact that in this state, she, in order to be found not guilty by reason of insanity, she would have to be found that she did not know at the time that what she was doing, that she was breaking the law. From what she said after and her behaviors after, to me, it seems like she knew. And even the fact of her saying, like, y'all are gonna have fun trying to find him, and just all of those things. They're strange and they're odd, but I don't think it meets the criteria of the person that is once again found in the moment. Because so that's what Letitia Stout tried to say. Like, she tried to say that, she had multiple personalities and that she was dissociating and she didn't remember what she did, but like her behaviors they were very calculated after, and that somebody that truly is not guilty by reason of insanity, they are not going to have this type of understanding. Yes, you learned a lot during the Darrell Brooks, the judge addressing his plea. Yes, and the Darrell Brooks case, that was okay. So Sarah, you don't see this one as also being a little bit on that, like, so you said this about her, but I don't like she's so I'm careful about what I say because I do have my license, and so I'm careful. Y'all know I'm careful about what I say. To me, from where I am and from what I saw from all the testimony and the videos and all of that, while her behavior was bizarre, to me, it did not seem, if I was on the jury, I also would have said that she was just guilty. That's what I would have found. Do y'all know how long the jury deliberated? Because I don't think it was very long. I don't think the jury took a very long time at all. So we're gonna skip ahead to the next psychologist. This is Dr. Christina Ingen, something like that. She testified a little bit later. So let's go on ahead and take a look at a little bit of her testimony.
It's 13. Do you recognize that exhibit?
Yes,
And what is that?
it's a copy of my report.
And does that contain your
She is a board certified forensic psychologist. I believe she has more experience. She did the not guilty by reason of insanity assessment, because that one is specifically looking at her state of mind at the time of the crime.
I guess, factual findings and ultimately your opinions with respect to the NGI evaluation?
Yes,
I'd move 13.
Any objection?
Subject to cross, Your Honor, no objection.
13 will be received.
So I guess generally, can you describe the process that you undergo to conduct an NGI evaluation?
yes, the evaluation consists of a clinical interview, so a meeting with Ms. Shabusiness.
All right. So I do want to address this right here because so any person that's incarcerated, they can have access to therapy services, and also they can have access to different programs. She can continue substance treatment. She could do any of those things. And so it would be her volunteering to do this. I could see the I don't know how many life sentences. I don't know if she's facing one life sentence. I don't know exactly what she's facing, but she will have access to services. Um, and so so that is in every, but each one has different resources. So for some people there might be like a wait list for that. But if you remember the Letitia Stout case, she had sessions with a psychologist and different mental health treatment. If somebody comes in on medication, they continue those medication. The jail is responsible for their mental well-being as well, and they do have psychologists there that just do that. I have friends that have worked in different jails as the psychologist. I used to do the assessments, the incoming intake assessments for all new juveniles that were being assigned, and I could recommend them to, based on the intake, they could be recommended for different treatment programs. And so there are a lot of services. Now, some places might be more overcrowded, or there might be less resources available in some places. But if she wanted to get help, there are ways to get that support. And so, all right, let's keep going.
I also conducted a full discovery review, so review of all of the police reports, videos,
Gonna fast forward a little.
I guess what were some of your findings with respect to Ms. Shabusiness's performance on the MMPI test?
Well, first, let me be clear that the test does not say anything about Ms. Shabusiness's functioning. In February of 2022, it only provides information about her functioning at the time of the test. So what was relevant from that was that there was indication of symptom exaggeration. She responded to items, she endorsed a number of symptoms that genuine individuals with genuine mental illness would not endorse. The frequency, number of unusual symptoms that she acknowledged was greater than those.
And so y'all know I love the questions. And so she's talking about giving her the MMPI now. Yes, she did take the MMPI, and it is a true or false test. There are, I think she said, over 300 questions. I personally give the PAI, the Personality Assessment Inventory. I like that one a little bit better. And it is the MMPI 3 right now. They released a new edition, I think she said in 2017. I like the PAI. I haven't given an MMPI since graduate school, so that's since like 2000 maybe. Oh, and the professor I worked for, she didn't like it either. So it might have been like 2006, 2007 was probably the last MMPI I had to do. I am not a fan of it. It's only true or false. So for every question, you have to answer true or false. The PAI says false, sometimes true, mainly true, very true. It's a little bit more broad, and so that's why I prefer that test. And we will keep going.
Those with genuine mental illness. And then there was also indication of non-credible memory impairment built into those, the results of those validity indices.
So I just want to go back a little bit. Those are good points. So this testing is sort of in the moment as you're meeting with Ms. Shabusiness, is that right?
Correct.
But why is it still something you administer in the course of an NGI evaluation?
So getting back to that term of response style, that's very important to understand if the individual is being forthright in their account of information that they provide to me. And what I found with these elevated indices indicating the exaggerated descriptions of mental illness, unusual descriptions of mental illness, is that the information that was being reported to me needed to be interpreted with caution. Ms. Shabusiness's self-report could not be taken at face value.
And I think you state that anything that's not objectively observed should be closely scrutinized. Is that right?
Correct. So then it would be important to find other sources of information that would support what she's telling me versus.
All right. So I want to address something in the chat, because your sister said the MMPI 3 is gloriously short. So that's why I didn't give the MMPI 2. It had over 500 questions. It was 567 questions. I had to look it up. I'm going to share with y'all. Like 567 true or false questions. And so and that's just according to this right here. And so the newest version has, I think it says 338. And so I was not a fan of the MMPI. The whole true or false thing. That's what gets me. That's why I don't give that one. All right, let's keep going.
Versus relying just exclusively on her self-report.
And one of the phrases you used was endorsed symptoms. What does that mean?
For example, I'm just making this test example up, but I feel depressed. A true response would be an endorsement of that symptom.
So an endorsement is something somebody.
Okay. And so I want to address something else in the chat. So I encourage people to not take a break when they're taking some of those tests, because if you change your responding, So it can make the test invalid. So if I wouldn't split up taking the MMPI over 2 different days. I would have somebody do it all on the same day if they can. I've had some situations where people have had to do it at home, the PAI, because y'all know I like that one. But I typically try to get them to do it all in one setting if they can, because they're more likely to be consistent in their responding versus taking it over multiple days. Because all of these tests will ask similar questions in different ways to try to see how consistent a person is in their responding. And I agree that the whole true or false, let me see, the easy to overthink true or false. A lot of people get stuck on that. And so that's why I do the PAI. I love how somebody mentioned that that the MMPI is now shorter than the PAI.
He's telling you.
Yes.
So based on the interview you had with Ms. Shabusiness, your review of some of those collateral sources of information, were you able to offer an opinion with respect to whether Ms. Shabusiness was suffering from a mental disease or defect?
Yes.
And what was, I guess, that opinion?
I reached the opinion that while she did have a mental health conditions, these did not appear to qualify as mental diseases and defects.
In your report, you outlined, I guess, 3 mental health conditions. Is that right?
Correct.
What are those?
The diagnoses that I offered were methamphetamine-related use disorder, and that was applied in acknowledgement of Ms. Shabusiness's general use of methamphetamine in that time period. The diagnosis of methamphetamine intoxication was applied because she was using methamphetamine at the time of the crime. And then the final diagnosis I gave was methamphetamine-induced psychotic disorder. And I offered that one because Ms. Shabusiness was describing, and the records contained indication of paranoia. I think she made a comment about muscle rebuilding during the homicide, and this indicated to me the presence of psychotic symptoms, which I attributed to the recent methamphetamine use.
So, and that's a question I have. So mental health conditions, in your opinion, are different from mental diseases or defect?
Correct.
And the 3 diagnoses you offered, you stated those are not mental diseases or defects.
That is my understanding.
Sarah. So, but the thing is for this state, if the substance use is voluntary, that, and I think she gets to this a little bit later, that's why. Okay. And so that's just how it is in this state.
And why is that?
And I think if she had been found in the act, I don't know if that would have been different versus how things went after, or I don't know. You really will never know. I did listen to the 911 call where even the 911 operator, everybody is like, what? Like, how are you? My heart breaks for Shad, I think was his name, for his family that found him in that state and then found all this that happened. And it'll be interesting to hear if they give a victim witness, if they give a statement. I saw the testimony of Shad's mom's boyfriend, and I wonder if because I don't think she testified. I think the boyfriend testified, and I think they're probably pleased with how things came out, because I think they think their child was taken in cold blood. I don't think they thought that that she was, yeah. So, yeah. I think the substances likely played a role, but with these types of defenses, that's not a reason to not be found legally responsible for your behavior.
Because, excuse me. So if one ingests an intoxicant voluntarily, so they took it of their own volition, And if they were not naive to its effects, that would mean it's my understanding, based on the case law, that the defendant would be subsequently responsible for all alterations of thinking, judgment, behavior related to that intoxication.
That's the law in that
I guess,
state.
were you aware of any information in the materials you reviewed that Ms. Shabusiness's methamphetamine use was anything but voluntary?
No.
And that obviously she reported a history of using methamphetamine to you.
Yes.
So I guess, were you of the opinion that she was not naive to its effect?
Correct. Yes. And I'm also aware that she had psychotic symptoms in the context of methamphetamine use the year prior. So certainly she was aware of its effects, broadly speaking, to include psychosis.
So I want to pause just here. Methamphetamine use in general, I guess, in your
Thanks.
experience and in your education training, are you aware of some of the symptoms that may manifest as a result of that?
Yes.
And what are some of those?
So excessive energy, decreased need for sleep, and then oftentimes we see in the field of forensic psychology that it can induce psychotic symptoms. So misperceptions of reality and paranoia.
You also mentioned a year prior there was a diagnosis of at the Nicolay Psychiatric Center. Is that right?
Yes.
And did you consider, I guess, the applicability or the appropriateness of a bipolar 1 disorder?
I did.
And what was your conclusion with respect to that propriety of that diagnosis?
After considering the diagnosis of bipolar 1 disorder, I did rule it out because I am aware that being intoxicated.
And rule out means that she determined that that was not an accurate diagnosis.
Or having a methamphetamine-induced psychosis can look virtually similar or indistinguishable from a manic episode with psychosis. So the two look similar. And so what I would be looking for if I were to support a bipolar 1 disorder diagnosis is the presence of that psychosis and the mood elevation when there's no methamphetamine use present.
And are you aware of any of those symptoms absent in the context of methamphetamine use?
I'm not aware of a time ever that Ms. Shabusiness displayed psychotic symptoms or elevated mood outside of the methamphetamine use.
And I guess you are aware, though, that bipolar 1 diagnosis was applied to Ms. Shabusiness in April of 2021.
Yes.
Are you aware, though, that there was concerns about recent methamphetamine use around that same time?
Yes, I believe that she tested.
Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory 3, correct?
Yes.
I see that number changes oftentimes. Has it changed?
It actually, I can't recall how long it was the MMPI-2, but it was that edition for several decades. And the MMPI-3 was based on 2017 population estimate. So it's a relatively recent addition.
And it gets up.
She learned that lesson the hard way, and the dad seemed to blame it on the husband, and I think he's currently the husband is incarcerated as well. This is just a whole lot of that. So let's keep going. So this is now the cross-examination of this witness by the defense.
Updated and upgraded every few years. Is that fair?
No, it was many decades before
30.
it was updated.
It
Okay.
was a long time.
And it's essentially a true-false test?
That's the response format. It's more complicated than that.
Okay. What kind of questions are on this MMP?
So she can't talk about this questions because that's a protected, that's a copyright issue. So she cannot talk about the types of questions that are on there. But
As part of the educational, assessment, as part of your report, did she report a history of some learning disabilities or difficulties?
She did. She attributed them to a diagnosis of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder.
And was it such that she had some issues with school, suspensions, ultimate expulsion?
Yes, she was expelled, the result of fighting.
The information that you have as far as your November 4th.
So I covered dad's testimony this morning, and the dad testified this morning. He was called by the defense, and I think they were wanting him to talk about her mental health as a teen and the loss of her mother, especially her mother passing in the home but she never saw her mom. She didn't find her mom, but that could still potentially be a traumatic grief or that's a significant loss. And I think they were trying to say that after that point that she had a lot of things come up after that. So I think that's what they were trying to say. And I thought dad said that she was 11 when her mom passed, but so let's keep going.
14th, 2022 report. It's somewhat stale. Is that fair?
I would disagree with that.
It is from last year though, correct?
Correct.
Nobody gave you any reports from Bell and Health to review, correct?
Correct.
You could have, doctor, upgraded your report by looking at additional records, Bell and Health and the Purveyor records. Is that fair?
Where I left my report, as indicated on the last page, is that I would be happy to receive any additional records that I was unable to obtain, and I would update my report.
They're going to go back and forth about reports and records and why she didn't, because she never received the additional reports. Because he even tried to make it sound like because the other doctor from this morning, that because her report was more current, that would be the more accurate one. But no, because we're talking about the time of the offense, her mental state at that time, not her mental state now. And so her report, Dr. Christine, that her report was actually closer to the time of the offense. They went back and forth on that. Let's keep going.
Because mine was in closer proximity to the alleged offenses. So that's another way to look at it.
But another way to look at it is your, with due respect, your report is lacking because you haven't reviewed the Bell.
The judges' faces, the poor judge through all of this, the judges' faces got me sometimes too.
Health records, correct?
It is missing that piece of information, but I would like to point out that it's not common for me as an evaluator when I'm looking at an offense that occurred in 2022 to be requesting records from when one was a teenager. Those would not be, they're certainly generally relevant, but they say little about what was going on in 2022.
Did Taylor Shabusiness tell you that she had no memory of the alleged offense?
She
tell
did.
you? When did she tell you that on both dates? October 12th and October 21st?
I did not ask her about the offenses on the first date. I only asked her on the second date, which is when she reported the amnesia.
That was on October 21st of 2022.
Yes.
And in reviewing those Nicolay records, it's true that she was hospitalized, correct?
Yes.
For about a month, right?
Um,
A couple weeks.
And so I'm going to go back to the last comment. So I don't think the prosecution would have offered any type of plea agreement because that's typically the only way that you avoid a trial is if there's some type of plea agreement. And I don't think I think this was a very public case. I remember hearing about it when it happened because it made national news. It was so strange and odd. And yeah. So, every defendant, they have the right to be, innocent until proven guilty. And so that's why I'll try to say, and she was found guilty of this, and later the judge is going to come back. But yeah, let's keep going.
Somewhere between a couple of weeks and a month.
Okay. And that she was prescribed some medication for nightmares?
I believe that she was prescribed Abilify.
And
I can
go ahead.
refresh my recollection.
Page 3.
Thank you. Okay, sure. She did say Prazosin for nightmares.
Okay. And it was such that when you talked with Taylor Shabusiness that she was actively hearing voices, those were the comments that she made to you?
Yes.
Did she indicate to you that she was hearing voices, in her cell?
Yes.
Who are they of?
I think she was less clear. They were very vague. She may have suggested that she was hearing voices of her coworkers, pejorative in nature. She also said that she was hearing a voice saying, "I love you." I don't know who she said was saying, "I love you."
Can you help me with this? What is a manic symptom?
That would be extreme mood elevation, increased goal-directed activity, decreased need for sleep, decreased risk appraisal. Those are some primary characteristics.
Extreme mood, like throwing a chair at a doctor?
It's not like she held her face so well.
What I gather that you're referring to is the evaluation of Dr. Lighton of
Yes.
Ms. Shabusiness. I'm hesitant to characterize that as a product of a manic episode.
As far as you understand, it happened out of the blue, correct?
Just because it happened out of the blue, that's more impulsive. But he doesn't know. And he's also trying to help his client. He is actively trying to help his client. And so yes, it can also be used as a mood stabilizer. It's commonly diagnosed. It's commonly given as for individuals with bipolar disorder or with mood symptoms. And so, yes. So, because these doctors, so I thought it was just a mood stabilizer, but I guess it's also within the antipsychotic field. And I think, and so, because over in Emily D. Baker, because they were like waiting for risperidone, and somebody did mention risperidone later. And I think she was on another antipsychotic as well. But I think this was she was prescribed these things after she started using methamphetamines. And so, yeah, that's the whole thing. All right, let's just keep going.
Yes.
Exactly. But that's our legal system.
Did you have the occasion to review the report from Dr.?
Because do y'all want to know? So it's I told y'all I'm bad with names. The guy that his 3 kids, because he admitted it as well. And he's pled not guilty, and he's gonna get a whole trial that's paid for by the state. And I believe they're going for death penalty in that case. In death penalty cases, There's always a lot more. Sometimes they take a little bit longer. Like they have to make sure they do everything correctly, because those get appealed very, very easily. Exactly. Yes. I don't even want to say his name. I did do a video of his arrest because I could not. He was just so calm, like that. It was calculated. He supposedly had been planning it. Like it was just, and it was all because, like, ew, like that case. Ugh. But all right. But yeah, but that's the place that we live. Those are the freedoms and liberties that we have.
Or Tracy Lucetta.
No.
All right. So that's basically the gist of her testimony. The defense comes back, no, the prosecution comes back and asks her some additional questions. There were the closing statements. The defense really, to me, I think they put forward the best case that they had, but they really didn't have a strong expert because if the person requested by the court to do the not guilty by reason of insanity defense, if they find that the person is, truly not competent, or that they are not guilty by reason of insanity, then those things take a whole different route. It goes the whole different way. But sometimes the experts disagree, and the defense expert in this case, to me, they did not come off as credible as the prosecution's experts. She did this like it was the verbose. Like she was just she expounded on her answers for very long periods of time. And she did not keep it short and sweet, making sure to only answer the question that she was asked, letting the attorney guide the questioning. Like she didn't do that. And she went off on these long monologues, and sometimes that can do a bad look for the jury. I also think she was mad when they questioned, when that poor, and it was a little blonde guy. I think he's like blonde. He looks like he's like 20. He's not 20, but like like when the one guy asked her, when the prosecuting attorney asked her, you know, why didn't you give any tests? Isn't that typical within this type of thing? She's like, I don't have to do. Like she just got seemed to be angry, and she rolled her eyes when he asked her about the MMPI. She's like, let's talk about the MMPI. Like it was just, and the jury is seeing all of this. And to me, the prosecution's experts came across a lot more professional, and I think they did a much better job. And so that was that. So most of y'all probably know, but the jury did come back with a decision. Law and crime. They timed it. Let's see. Was that? Yeah, right there. So right at about an hour, they came back. And so we will play this portion, just the verdict, real quick. I think they're waiting for the jury to come in. So to me, she's acting relatively like normal, and she seemed to be looking for who was all present in the courtroom. Then she'll start making some different faces and things, but Ray, same. Especially when this is like that's what's standard, and people that think their clinical interview, that's all they need to come to their decision. And I didn't love the fact that her attorney was present for the evaluation, similar to the Letitia Stout one.
Okay, be seated. You are the foreperson, is that correct? Yeah. If you could hand your verdict to the bailiff.
Not sure. Like, because it looks like there's something. Sometimes it does it backwards. Looks like there's something right there. Not sure.
Okay. The
Yes.
verdict seems to be in order, and I will read it as follows. Question 1. At the time the crimes were committed, did the defendant have a mental disease or mental defect? Answer, no. There's no answer then for question 2. It is dated this date, July 27, 2023, signed by the foreperson. There were no dissenting jurors. Is there a request by either of the parties to have the
And so they end up polling the jury. Let me know if y'all have any questions as we kind of close things out. I did want to share just an article that talks about living well with serious mental illness. I forgot to share that one. I also have it linked over, and this is from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. And they specifically talk about bipolar disorder, a brain disorder that causes intense shifts in mood, energy, and activity levels. People have manic episodes in which they feel extremely happy, euphoric, and energized. Usually they also have depressive episodes, major depression, and schizophrenia. And then also just talking about support that's available for people with serious mental illness, and then also the treatments. And there are different fact sheets for understanding these different diagnoses and different treatments. I'm just going to click on the bipolar disorder one. And so here are those signs and symptoms of bipolar disorder. There's bipolar 1 and bipolar 2 and cyclothymic disorder. I normally see bipolar 1 or 2. I don't see cyclomic. I don't have people diagnosed with that one as much. That one's a bit harder to parse out. And then treatments include medication, therapy, and then some people require long-term treatment. Medication compliance is often an issue from what I've seen, because sometimes the manic episodes feel really good, and sometimes the medication make people feel the medication, yeah. So sometimes people don't like how they feel on the medication. And then there are things that people can do to help manage mental health. And the one is avoiding alcohol and then other substances and stuff like that. And so, all right. I definitely wanted to share that. Let's see. Yeah. So trazodone is often given for sleep. But it zonks you out. And so I've had some clients that were on medications like clonidine or trazodone, and either their dose was too high or just the impact that the medication had on their system. By the morning, they were still very tired and sedated, and they had to talk with their prescriber about different options. Let me see. I agree that, so Letitia Stout seemed to want to present well and want experts to be impressed with her and all of that. She seemed to be a little bit more disconnected, and I think that's why she was giving because the defense expert really didn't give a clear diagnosis, because they asked, and she was like, to me, she ended with, it could be bipolar, it could be schizophrenia, it could be schizoaffective. Like their expert didn't give like a clear diagnosis. These are the symptoms that I see. This is the diagnosis that she has, and this is why I feel that she was not in a state to understand the legal impact of her behavior at the time of the offense. Their expert did not say that at all. And so just got notified. Welcome. If you're catching up on replay, if you go back and look at it, you can. But yes. Thank you for I think this case was fast. I think, was it like a week and a half? I don't like it. I think they had the competency portion, and they had some other things, but like the facts were clear. They seemed to stay on track. This judge, he was about his business, and I think they got through this a little quicker than I thought. All right. People are bringing up Letitia Stout. And Letitia, she might have had some anxiety. I think hers was more personality. That was my feeling that I got from her, is that I think she also did have that history of, she could have had the history of past trauma, but she very much seemed to be the aggressor and instigator in some relational conflict. She was but I think her stuff was possibly more like personality disorder. Those were the types of vibes that I got from her and her testimony and all of that. Welcome, welcome. Recent MSW grad. Good luck as you're doing your residency and studying for your test. I used to supervise LPCs, licensed professional counselors. In Virginia, they changed the rules. I think only LPCs can supervise LPCs. But I used to oversee a residency program, and we had some master's level and LPC students. And so let me see. That y'all know. But Dr. Lewis saw DID everywhere, okay? Like I think I can accurately say it. Cuz Dr. Lewis, she like called out the state saying, "Aren't y'all didn't y'all pay for that expert?" I don't know. Like Dr. Lewis, ooh, she got a lot more feisty, and her testimony was all over the place. She answered whatever she wanted. Like that case was a mess. It seemed like that whole thing of the requesting the MRI or the brain scan, and then she withdrew the request. I just couldn't. I could not. Yes, judge was no nonsense. Agreed. Oh, thank you, thank you. Welcome, welcome. I appreciate you all in this community. This is why I share these things. If y'all have non-criminal stuff that y'all want me to cover. So I have a friend that is a social worker because kids are going to start to get ready to go back to school. And so I think I'm going to be interviewing her during a live. I think that'll be in mid-August, and I will schedule it. I will post it. I did an interview recently with Dr. Barrelin, talking about women empowerment. Her whole goal. Oh, I have her book here. Her little. Oh, I don't. It's pink. Ugh, my lights are. So it's the Cared For journal. Her whole thing is being cared for, and so but I did a whole video on that. I see lots of comments. And so let's see. The speed helped that she had a lawyer. She behaved in court. Okay. The Murdaugh trial, that was a mess. And they did a lot of voir dire. They did a lot of like off the record. I think they did like a few different off the record. And then the person went on the record, and that one was so long. Wow. That one helped me reach certain milestones here on YouTube. My coverage of that case. I think it was the sentencing. I think it was the sentencing one, but yeah. So I'm still going to do criminal stuff. Okay. But like, I want to do other stuff too. So it's not that I'm not going to do criminal stuff. It's that, so I want to make sure. So my goal here is to build community, and then also to share accurate, insightful, helpful information. I enjoy covering the trials, but some of them get to me personally, so I won't cover the guy with the 3 kids. If they bring mental health up, I might cover something with that, but like I will probably watch other lawyers' coverage of that case. I don't know that I will cover that one, because I have to be careful with my own mental health. And so during my day, so what I do is I work with trauma survivors. I work with kids that have been, and adults that have been adopted. And I work with a lot of trauma during the day. And I don't mind doing this. So I do it when I have the capacity, but I don't have the capacity to do it every day. I could not only cover criminal cases every single day. That's his name. Like I have to do that one in doses. That one is so difficult. I'm gonna be watching the Long Island serial one because we haven't really had a serial murderer thing come up in a while, and so I am intrigued with it, but I don't know that I'll cover it. So covering it live because y'all are like, I try to add something helpful, and when I watch cases like that, it's like I have nothing to say. Like this, it's just a mess. And so, yes, y'all know I know it's all love. So I know it's all love. So EMDR is something that I would like to get trained in. Um, some people find it to be effective. Some people find that it's not. Individuals with complex trauma, you have to be careful because sometimes the therapist has to make sure that the individual can cope out of session with everything that kind of comes up. And so there is a trauma informed way to do it. I recently ordered a complex trauma guidebook, and I might cover. I'm going to try to find the book because I'm doing a training with the author that wrote the book. Let me see if I can find that book. There we go. Complex PTSD. I just ordered it. It should be here next week. Let me see. Present, share screen. Let's do this. There we go. So this one here by Arlene Schwartz. I will add this to my Amazon link, but if you're looking for it, you can easily get to it. See, I purchased it on the 24th. And so I've heard good things about this manual. And I'm currently doing a training with her, and I found her to be very effective. It's an integrative mind body approach to trauma recovery. And so I'm going to be taking a look at that. If I find helpful things, then I will definitely share those things. Ooh, what does DNMS? What are those letters? Oh, it was a good fit for you. Good. I don't know what are those letters? Let me see. Let me know what that stands for. I'm going to try to Google it. DNMS? Therapy. Yes. Oh, wow. Developmental needs meeting strategy. Wow. I have not heard of that. Let me share my screen real quick because I love sharing resources and different. So I am just at it's dnmsinstitute.com. I just Googled DNMS and this is what popped up. Developmental needs meeting strategy, what it is and how it works. It's a multidimensional, comprehensive, strength-based, client-centered ego state therapy that can resolve relational trauma. Building self-esteem, desensitize traumas, calm hostile introjections, reduce internal conflicts, overcome processing blocks, integrate dissociative parts of self. That reminds me of IFS, internal family systems, talking about the dissociated or disintegrated parts of the self, repairing childhood attachment wounds. That reminds me of that inner child work. Orient wounded parts to present time. Complement other modalities like EMDR, reduce unwanted behaviors, beliefs, and emotions, use alternating bilateral stimulation. So that's what EMDR does. So what bilateral, it's taking the left side and the right side of the brain, and it's helping integrate the two. So when a trauma happens, when a negative life event happens, when our system becomes overwhelmed, that incident gets stored as fragments in our brain. And then our brain wants to process it. And that's what flashbacks are. That's what dissociation, or that's what all the trauma symptoms, it's our body's normal reaction to an abnormal situation. And so there are ways to resolve that work. Complex trauma is the hardest because often it just takes time. to resolve those different things. But trauma memories get stored all over. It's not so normally the memory of what I had for dinner is stored in my hippocampus. That is filed neatly away. Whereas a more stressful memory right after the incident, because in the midst of a stressful event, our brain's main goal is to just survive it. The brain does not care about any like so you're not going to remember the you may not remember certain things, and that's why sometimes eyewitness testimony can sometimes be inconsistent. um it's the best that we have, but that's why sometimes they'll kind of talk about that, because memory is difficult in the midst of a stressful situation if you're in an activated stress response. Because when the amygdala is activated, that fight, flight, freeze, fawn trauma response, the thinking brain deactivates and we go into survival mode. And the only goal is to survive the incident, survive the thing. I have a book, this is a good time to mention, Turning Crisis into Clarity, How to Survive or Thrive in the Midst of Uncertainty. I talk a little bit about trauma in the brain because I think it's important to know, because often when I explain these things to the survivors that I work with, because they just think they're great, like they're just like, they're not understanding like why they're experiencing what they're experiencing. And so helping go through some of those things can be very helpful. But the brain is, and so what bilateral stimulation does is it helps an individual process the event, but for it to not get stuck in any one particular part. So moving the eye. So sometimes the person will have a person click left and right. Sometimes they'll have a pen or their finger where the person follows their eye, follows the finger with their eye. There is a technique, it's called a butterfly hug, where you like latch your fingers together. I learned this on TikTok, where, we learn all our therapy techniques. No, we don't. But where you just click from side to side. This is a technique that's sometimes taught in EMDR. We add breathing to it. But it's just something, the left to right. Even just holding a ball or something and just watching it go left to right can sometimes just help regulate the brain. And so doing those things can often be very helpful. And so the brain always tries to protect us. It really is incredible. I agree. And I love with people that I work with, how they survived. And sometimes the way they survived, they've picked up some dysfunctional patterns and patterns that are no longer serving them. But we don't shame for what they've picked up along the way. And now we try to find, okay, what are ways that we can find, how can we replace maybe one of those things with something that's a little bit healthier? And because you never have somebody let go of all their defenses at once, because that's just too much. And so, okay. So one therapist had a hand buzzer. Yes. And so the tapping, so there is like a tapping, like where you tap certain like pressure points, or here, like I think it's here. There are like certain tapping places. I have done, it's EFT, I think is I know there's emotion focused therapy, and then there's a tapping therapy. If you search it on YouTube, but people can walk you through like a whole tapping thing. I've done the tapping thing in a training and I found it to be helpful. It's not always something that I teach clients, but for clients where it's helpful, I share resources on YouTube or places where they can go to look for stuff like that. All right. I'm going to start getting, so I got to head off. But this was super fun. Super glad that we were able to go through all of that. I'm not surprised the jury came back so fast, because I truly think the defense's expert did not lay out a clear and convincing case that she should be found not guilty by reason of insanity. Aw, first stream. Thank you. Thank you. Aw. Thank you for joining. Some people, so I will get comments about talk more or talk less, and so I can tell the people that are a part of this community for real. And then some people just find the video, especially when it starts getting certain ones that get a lot of views. The algorithm's going to show it to people that won't like it, and they're going to comment something. And so I truly appreciate all the love and support. It means so much. And I hope you all enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye.